Ain't no surprise I didn't get these scars from falling over in church. I told some lies, broke some laws and ties instead of good hard work. When I die, I'll take nothing that I took down in the dirt. Lord, I'll cry and I'll be avenged by all those I hurt.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you're listening to this podcast. All 15 of you, I appreciate y'all. I'm sorry again. Dude, intention and reality. In my head, I thought I had this written and ready to go, and then when I started digging through it, I was like, man, even some of this stuff's outdated in just like 2 years. So I had to go back through it a little bit and dive into it. But today's topic, we're going to dive into nutrition. And nutrition to me specifically, not like nutrition to everybody in the world, but what I believe to be important when it comes to nutrition, specifically in my life and the life of pretty much anybody that I know. Any real human being wants to know these questions. And like part of the questions that I got for this were pulled from people here locally where I live in Troy, Missouri. And then some of these questions were literally from going on the internet, Ask the Internet, and asking, what are the most asked questions when it comes to the topic of nutrition. And, some of the questions, some people are going to think like, really, people don't know this stuff. But in all reality, how could they unless they went out of their way to learn it? Because if we're not educating our doctors with this information, we're sure as hell not just educating our normal human citizens unless you're going to, a special education for school. So some of these questions like, what is a calorie? How much should I eat? What should I be eating? How to calculate my body's, they asked this in different ways, but really what the question that they were trying to ask is how to calculate their TDEE or their BMR, which is their total daily energy expenditure or their basal metabolic rate. So I want to get into those like few questions, like the most common questions in the world when it comes to nutrition, the what is this and what is that. And then I kind of want to talk about diet specific stuff with regards to nutrition and, what are diets? What exactly are they supposed to do? What exactly is a diet designed to function as? What is the etymology of diet in general? And not just the word, but like when did this whole idea of dieting become a thing? And just how much the American people, and I'm sure it's this way in other Western countries too, but just how much we're preyed upon by fake information by these companies trying to push stuff as nutrition products or health products that in all reality are just marketing one aspect of their product while neglecting all the other aspects of their product being bad for you. So, it's October. Happy Halloween to everybody. It'll be Halloween in a week. I will probably put out another episode before then. That is the plan because I'm going to break this up into 2 podcasts. This nutrition stuff is just so dense and so heavy that like if you're listening into it just passively, I'm going to spit out a lot of stuff. And I've been trying to figure out a way to get my notes to you guys because like I have notes that I've taken on this. And it's not like my notes have some sort of magic in them that, some special information that people don't have. It's just me trying to organize all the words that are in my head in one place so that if I say something and you're like, what did he say? I have the notes here. They're too big generally to fit in like the YouTube video description. Otherwise I would. But I will, I'll see if I can fit some of it in there. I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can post like a link to a Google Share Drive or something in there. All right. Let's jump right into this. I think the first and foremost thing is just setting the basic stage of nutrition. Like I don't want to say, well, what is nutrition? Nutrition is just like, in general, it's what we eat and what we eat, what it's composed of and how that breaks down in our body and how it provides energy to us in different ways for different aspects of our energy expenditure. We have lots of different processes in our body that require energy in its various forms. So how do we take the food that we eat, put it into our body, and make something out of it. That's a whole nother podcast. I'm not trying to get into that. I'm talking about it just more in general of how do we conceptualize nutrition as Americans in this Western world. And really, for people who are listening outside of America, probably no one, but if you are, I want you guys to have a little view into what it is like for us here. Like a lot of people think that America is this great place. They have everything, and it is. But the problem is that companies kind of tie themselves to the American people in that you go into pretty much any small Midwest American city, there's going to be like a Subway, a McDonald's, or a Casey's, like a gas station. And that's like all you're going to have for maybe 5-10 miles. So then, 10 miles out from there, you might have a Walmart. So you're going to get some stuff. Maybe it's 20-30 miles to that Walmart. So, and that's just here in Missouri where I'm at, where we're rural, but we're not super, super rural. We're not like the sticks. There's places about an hour from me where legitimately there's hardly anything for about an hour until you get to us. Like you could drive and there's nothing there until you get there. So we are very spread out in America as compared to European countries. So having everything in a place that's available to all of our citizens throughout this country, take all of Europe and put it on the United States. Now, remember that all of Europe, those are all individual countries that are responsible for themselves, that are all participating in a union, the EU, or whatever it is, just friendly. Here, we're all states trying to do the same thing, but our territory is much larger, and the federal government has grasped so much more control than is necessary in order to do this, when this should be, put back to the states. We have all of this stuff that's going on, and nutritionally we're just not in the best place. How can we be one of the most advanced countries on this planet and at the same time be suffering with like the worst obesity and opioid crisis? Like, there is obviously a lot going on, and I don't want to soapbox this podcast, but what I'm trying to help you guys understand is, in the system that we are in, you can still make better choices than others. And what I want to do today is provide some information that will help you make better choices than others. Because if you're in a food desert, or you're in an area where the only place that you can buy food from is Walmart, and maybe the fresh produce sucks, and you can only really buy canned vegetables if you want them to be good, or canned fruits and stuff, that's fine. It's just doing the things like buying that instead of buying whatever else it is that we do. Like, it's the trying your best to make it yourself, to give yourself whole food options. And I think most of America has those availabilities to them, but there are some places where those options are so much more limited, just based on how spread out geographically we are. So let's jump into this first question of what is a calorie. So just to say the bro science answer, calorie is it's just something that we talk about as far as giving ourselves a baseline of how much energy this is providing us. But in all reality, it's the energy needed to raise 1 gram of water through 1 degree Celsius, usually defined as 4.1868 joules, 4.1 kilowatts of energy. It's a unit of measurement for energy, and that's why I hate using that term. Like, looking at that, because even when I read the definition, I'm like, it's so. If you're not a sciencey person, it's bad. So just think about it this way: if you are building a human body, calories are just like the nails that you put in there, and a certain amount of nails. No, that's a bad thing. That was a bad one. Look, it's just energy. Calories are just energy, and when you try to break down it too much further than that, we'll get into the different types of nutrition and how many calories they have in them, and more dense calorie foods versus less dense calorie foods, and understanding those things. But really, the main thing that you need to understand is a calorie is a unit of measurement, and we here use calories. Some people use joules. It's actually kilocalories. So like, when we see something in calories and it says like 10 calories, it's actually like 10,000 calories. And we just cut off all those zeros because that we don't really need it. So yes, just leave it there. The real reason that understanding why calories are important is everybody's body has a requirement of how many calories it's going to take each day to perform that day. Your body is consuming energy all day long, and it's not necessarily consuming calories. We just measure it in calories. The body is consuming energy, and it's consuming it in many different forms and many different functions. A lot of the time it's broken into glucose for muscle stuff. It's transported all around the body. We have different types of nutrition that we take in that is broken into different types of fuel for our body, like sugars, carbohydrates are broken down into their basis form and given to our body for movement. Calories from carbohydrates power a good amount of what we do. Then we have fats and triglycerides that are converted into ketones, and ketones are used for energy. Hint looking forward, ketones, ketosis, ketogenic diet. Like, think about that. High fat, high protein, low carb diets versus high carb, high protein, low fat diets. The big thing to understand is this: in 1 pound, there are approximately 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. Now, we know that because if there are X amount of grams in an ounce and there are X amount of ounces in a pound, so if there are 28 grams in an ounce and there are 16 ounces in a pound, and we know that so let's back up here a little bit. So energy can be broken into 4 macronutrient calories or categories. You have carbohydrates, protein, fat, and alcohol. And I put alcohol in it because alcohol per gram has a set calorie ratio, and people don't really think about it, but it doesn't provide energy. So I leave it over here. It's not necessarily providing energy like carbs and fat are. So carbohydrates, 1 gram of carbs has 4 calories. 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. So it's almost 225%, 225% stronger, something like that, or more dense. And then alcohol is about 7 calories per gram. So when you're like looking at a beer and you're like, how come they can't have 0-calorie beer? Well, because if it has alcohol in it, you can't take the calories out. Alcohol is a form of energy. It's what it is. You can't take the calories out. When you remove calories from an object, you're removing all the nutritional value. Something that is 0 calorie is literally just meant to fill you up, or like a drink. It's not meant to provide any energy, any sort of something, unless it has chemicals in it. And a lot of people think, oh, coffee gives me energy. It's like, no, coffee just stops tired. It doesn't give you energy. It just stops tired. And when we look at this and we're trying to figure out how to lose weight, losing weight is all based on, am I burning more calories than I'm eating? So if I want to do that, I need to first know, well, how many calories do I need per day? And we're going to get into total daily energy expenditure, but then how do I actually lose weight from there? So if I know that there are approximately 3,500 calories in a pound of fat, and I want to lose 1 pound of fat per week, so that simple math would be 3,500 divided by 7 equals 500, meaning I would need to be in a deficit of around 500 calories a day in order to lose 1 pound per week. Now, 500 calories a day, that might seem like a lot. It's like a McChicken and a half, I guess, something like that, of eating less or exercising more, or a combination of both. So that's where this gets so fucked up for everybody, is like no one can seem to agree that everyone acknowledges it, but no one can seem to agree on the mechanisms on how we go about doing it. What exercise is best? What diet is best? What this, what that? Now, what I will say is in a laboratory environment, what you will find out is that every single one of these diets is the same because it still is a mechanism of calorie in versus calorie out. So if I know that you burn 2,500 calories a day and I want you to lose 1 pound a week, and I want you to do it versus keto or Mediterranean or high carb or vegetarian or vegan or carnivore or whatever, all I have to do is set you to 2,000 calories a day and monitor it, and the progress should be there at the end of the week. Now, there might be other things there that would happen, like maybe you had a little too much salt, and even though that doesn't have a calorie in it, it makes you hold on to water. And then you hold on to a few more ounces of water. So at the end of the week, you got no weight loss. Or maybe you ran out of your medication and you had to go a day or two without your medication, and that makes you bloat like crazy. Maybe you're constipated. Maybe you're stressed. Maybe you got sick. And then at the end of the week, that's why I'm saying in a laboratory environment, in a perfect situation, yes, of course, all diets are going to be pretty much equal because it's a thing of calorie in versus calorie out. But I will tell you that in real life, the fucking world that we live in, Lane Norton and people who are on the internet trying to just espouse that nonsense all the time about it's just calorie in, calorie out. It doesn't matter what diet it is. It matters very much so what diet you choose. And I'm not saying that you have to choose a specific diet, but it very much matters how you choose to lose your weight specific to you. And not every diet is going to work for you the same as any other diet. And that is because people are different, environments are different, cultures are different. And because of all of those factors that are outside of a laboratory, real life, that is going to change the way that these diets are interactive with you and your results. Someone like me does really well when I go on a low carb diet. I lose a shit ton of weight. And the reason I lose a shit ton of weight is because I'm surrounded by carbs all the time, because it's where I live. A lot of the foods are very carby at the restaurants. It's a lot of fast food places up here. So if I start making my food myself, significantly, my carbs reduce just naturally, and thus my calories reduce just naturally, as well as my fats and things like that. So I say all this to say, when you are deciding on what works for you, don't go off what somebody else necessarily did unless you see something about that person's situation that aligns with you. If there is alignment in where you are at in life and where they are at in life, then there is a likelihood that what they did could help you. Parts of it could help you. All of it could help you. But understanding that a diet is very specific to your scenario, and while low carb is going to work for everyone who stays in a calorie deficit, it can be very hard to transition out of that. It can be very hard if you live in a place where maybe meat is a lot more expensive and it's not as available, or maybe the quality of meat isn't as good. So what I'm saying is real life is a lot different than what you read in a paper. And in all reality, I don't care what's in those papers. I don't care what is in those things unless they have significant peer review, because they're full of shit with everything else, all the pharmaceutical stuff, all the FDA stuff that goes on. So why am I going to believe them when it comes to nutrition and health stuff? You're not reliable in any other category, so why are you now magically reliable in this category? I'm going to go off what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, what I'm hearing, based on practice in my own life, based on experience of other people, because in all reality, that's more relevant than what's going on in a laboratory by a company that's trying to deceive us for potential financial gain. So I'm not saying that there aren't altruistic people in the nutrition space. There are. And I think that people like Lane Norton are doing a good job of showing that these studies are manipulated to provide data and information. But if you're then using other studies to debunk those studies, well, you see what I'm doing here? It's using the Bible to prove God. And you can't do that in this space. You have to be able to provide things. And he is doing the real work. and there are people that are doing the real work. But where I don't like it is the rhetoric and how it's presented, because it's just not helpful. It's not helpful to helping the American people. It's just helpful to pumping egos. So if you like guys like that, I have nothing against it. I'm just saying, take the studies, regardless if they agree with your thought process or disagree with your thought process, with a grain of salt. And let's keep this very simple. I'm not saying this is bro science. Let's just keep it simple. Let's not complicate it with what's going on in laboratory environments. All right. How many calories to lose a pound? So let's talk total daily energy expenditure, TDEE. This is essentially what this is the combination of everything that we do in a day. This isn't a set number. This is a variable number. Now your basal metabolic rate is variable but set in a way, and that can be part of your TDEE. It's around 60 to 80% of your TDEE, which is why I say it's variable and set. Like it has a limit of what it can be. It can't just be this infinite number or this super small micro number. But it's essentially what it is to keep the lights on. So your total daily energy expenditure is comprised of a few things: BMR, NEAT, TEF, and EXE. I think, exercise. So basal metabolic rate, NEAT would be non-energy or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. TEF is thermic effect of feeding, and EXE is just a abbreviation for exercise. So how much do you think the exercise is actually worth? Like, in all reality, a lot of people probably think that their exercise is what is making the big difference here. But in all reality, for most people, exercise only makes up about 5 to 10% of their total calories burned for the day. Your basal metabolic rate, which is just keeping the lights on, that is essentially what is burning most of your calories. Just being alive, just existing, being a human being is expensive energy-wise. It costs a lot of calories to keep our bodies running. Now, if you are constantly in a state of starving said body, your body's going to try to get more efficient because it's not going to work well. So it's going to try to adapt and change to a certain extent, and it won't be able to at a certain point. Like, this idea of dropping your base calories down to this place where like you can't lose weight is possible but not probable, because at the end of the day, all you have to do is start increasing your exercise and your NEAT, and you're good. Now, your NEAT is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that's stuff like moving your hands, that's stuff like walking, that's stuff like turning your head, that's stuff like speaking. It's all the activities that we do in a day that add up, but aren't necessarily exercise, but they still cost energy. It still costs energy to do this. Why? Because if I sat here and did this for maybe like 10 minutes, like I'm just constantly doing this, my shoulder's going to start getting a little tight. Maybe my arm's going to get a little tight. It probably would get tight faster. Like if I just held my arm out like here for a short period of time, because that requires energy and it requires my body to, use my muscles. So that is a big part. It makes up anywhere from 5 to 15% of the total calories burned for an individual. And what's crazy is they've done some studies. And look, studies when you're just measuring things, totally fine with. Studies when you're trying to achieve a certain outcome, not necessarily fine with. Or you want to see an outcome. But if you're just saying, okay, why are ADHD kids super skinny or something like that, or why are, this, that, and the other? Well, essentially they wanted to know, with these little fidgety kids, is it, how much energy is it burning? It's like some of these kids are burning hundreds and hundreds of calories a day just being super fidgety, bouncing their feet, moving their legs. And I do that stuff all the time as well. And I will definitely tell you that I don't know how much it affects. I don't know how much it's measurable, but 5 to 15%, it's the second largest category of energy that we burn in a day, or just those little movements. Thermic effect of feeding is essentially kind of what it sounds like. When we eat food, it requires energy within our body to break down that food. So anywhere from, around 5% of our total energy that we eat gets killed away instantly just in digesting it. So we're only about 95% efficient in our digestion and nutrition. 5%, going to being lost in energy of just the breakdown. And then exercise, that only makes up 5 to 10% of our total calories burned for a day and our total daily energy expenditure. Now, that's on average. So let's say you are like me and you want to go on a juice fast for 60 days, and then you want to go and eat one meal a day that's only like 12 to 1,400 calories a day. But on top of that, you want to walk 3 miles a day and do 45 minutes on the Stairmaster and occasionally a workout as well. You would be in like a negative, 2,000 calorie a day deficit sometimes after a 6-hour, hike and exercise session and only eating, 1,400 calories for the day. Look, doesn't sound good when I say it out loud, but when I tell you that I'm 300 plus pounds and I've got plenty of fat on me and I'm going to be okay, I was okay. Look at me. I'm here. I'm alive. So I'm a walking testament to that science being bullshit again. Once again, like what I'm saying is an individual's experience to me is almost more important to me than that, because knowing what is possible is more important than knowing what isn't possible, I guess. Like knowing that somebody's done it is better than knowing that there's no pathway to get there, I guess. Seeing that someone has done it. I don't say like, yeah, look at me as an example of what you should do. I'm saying look at me as an example of what's possible if you do X, Y, and Z, if you put your mind to it, if you dedicate yourself, if you motivate yourself. But also, when you lose that, look at me as a witness of look what happens when you stop doing all that stuff. Things start to fall apart. You don't look as good anymore. You don't feel as good anymore. So it's all things that I am personally still working on, things that I thought I was doing well with, but not. And I'm just trying to explain to you that it goes both ways. So when we're trying to figure out how much we should eat, I typically just tell people to start with their BMR. I will try to do my best estimate of getting a good, decent BMR number. And depending on what that number is, we'll start there. But the thing is it's all based on your goals. So if you have a really aggressive weight loss goal, you might want to set yourself to a 20, 40, 50% deficit, depending on how overweight you are, depending on how fast you want to or feel you need to lose that weight. For me, it was a heavy deficit because it's like, if I'm going to suffer, I don't want to suffer a little. It feels the same suffering. Like if I'm hungry, I'm hungry. It doesn't get much worse than hungry. And that's what people don't realize until they go a few weeks without eating, is that, man, the hunger never got worse than it did after like 6 hours. And that really just felt like uncomfortable. And yeah, you get a little antsy with the meal times and things, but the actual feeling of hunger, that goes away. At least in my experience, not for everybody, I guess. And I've had experiences where it hasn't. Like side point. We're not going to get into that. So trying to figure that out for yourself is going to be dependent. But where I would suggest to start by calculating your BMR, and then start eating at that point and start exercising a little bit, monitor your results, and adjust from there. If after 2 weeks you're down 10 pounds, but you have 100 pounds to lose, maybe that's not too bad. But if you only had 10 pounds to lose, maybe that was a little quick. Maybe you'd crashed your diet a little too hard. So do you understand? I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. Like, logic will prevail. Be smart. Use your brain. Math yourself a little bit here. it's not super complicated. It's just a matter of paying attention and monitoring. And this is another big problem that we'll get into at another point, but you got to fucking weigh yourself. Like, quit being scared of the scale. How are you knowing what you're even doing is working if you're too afraid to look? Schrodinger. You're giving yourself the Schrodinger treatment. So that's losing weight. Now, maybe you don't need to lose weight. You're just trying to figure out, how much do I need to eat so I don't gain weight? Like, how much am I eating now? Well, you can start tracking your food and then kind of do the math on it and figure out a good average and say, okay, well, this is kind of where I need to be right now based on this lifestyle. You can also do the math and see if that kind of lines up with where you think you are. I think a lot of people way overestimate the amount of calories they burn in a day and way underestimate the amount of calories they eat in a day that is leading to this, because a lot of the food that they're eating is not made by them, so they have no idea even what calorie content is in it. Like, great, McDonald's tells you that their McChicken has 350 calories in it or whatever, but it's like, okay, well, if I go buy a bun from the store and that bun has 110 calories in it, and let's just say it's 100, and then we're going to put mayonnaise on it, full fat mayonnaise, and we're going to put about a tablespoon at least on there, so that's like another 90 calories. So now we're up to almost 200 calories. So we're supposed to believe that a fried piece of chicken with oil on it and breading on it and fat in it is only supposed to have 200 calories. Maybe. But what I'm saying, that I think a lot of the time these calorie things when you're eating out at places are off. The measurements and the portions, they don't match what once again in the lab when it was created, when the FDA is just trying to make McDonald's tell them how many calories is in this thing. Like, in the lab, they were able to make it have that many calories, but in actual practice, is it that much, and that's I'm sorry to pick on McDonald's. I'm not saying anything against McDonald's. I'm not saying that McDonald's is lying about how many calories are in their food. But what I'm saying is that the portions of food are not always the same. Not every piece of chicken is going to have the same amount of calories as the next piece of chicken. Not everyone is going to have the same amount of mayo on it. And I think that a lot of the time that variability adds up throughout our day when you're eating 15 different items. You get a sandwich, and it's supposed to have 4 slices of ham on it, instead it has 6 or whatever. It's got X amount of mayo on it, and then that adds, and then the chips, and then the drink that you bought has sugar in it or whatever, and you thought it wasn't sugar. So like, all those things add up, and it's killing us. It's generally what it's killing us with. So when you're trying to maintain your weight, I would typically say, if your weight is not going up and it's not going down, track your food. Don't try to change the way you eat, but just write down what you're eating, and then do your best estimating at the calories. Like, try to plug it into an app. Do it for like a week or so, and ask yourself, is this a real week? Is this a bad week? Do the math. Do the BMR calculations. You can just go on Google and type in BMR calculator, and it'll give you a rough estimate. Like, they're not super, super accurate, but if it's within 10%, that's something. It's still something to shoot at, and then you can manipulate from. Like that, I think that people are looking for exact data. People are looking for something that is like perfectly catered to them, and it's like, dude, you're not that important. Just, you're not. Like, there isn't something that is going to specifically make you lose weight different. Like, you have your own environment, you have your own things that are going to change that, and it is specific to you, but there's nothing unique to you that this stuff doesn't work on, is what I mean. So the next question that people asked a lot about was, what should they actually be eating? And this is the really subjective stuff. And this is where it gets hard, because there's a lot of constraints on people, and there's a lot of things with people specifically that I don't like this, I don't like that, I won't eat this, I can't eat that, I'm allergic to this. First and foremost, I'm going to say this, and I don't really care if it's taken the wrong way because I know what I mean when I say this. But nothing is bad for you in moderation. It depends. Depends if you should eat certain things. But nothing, food-wise, is bad for you within moderation. But some things may be bad for you. So don't eat them. And what I mean by this is if you're an alcoholic, stop fucking drinking. You know, like, don't put yourself in situations where there's alcohol. Don't have it in your house. Don't go to bars. With food, it's a little different. So what do? You stop buying junk. You stop doing those things. But that's really hard because you're borderline addicted to those foods, just like the alcoholic is addicted. So can you go to rehab? Can you do these things? Maybe, maybe not. But really, I recommend, based on my own experience and seeing so many people fail based on refusing to do this, is that moderation is a waste of time if you have a lot of weight to lose. You can't afford to keep giving yourself the pizza and just say, well, I'm just having a slice at Costco after I got my groceries and that's just going to be my lunch for the day and it's okay. Yeah, I get it, but it's so macronutrient poor for you based on someone trying to lose weight that it's like, avoid those things. Avoid eating out. Avoid eating processed foods. So when it comes to me saying nothing is bad in moderation, that's my libertarian me inside, never wanting to tread on anyone and tell them what they can and can't have. But if you have goals and you're asking for advice, stop eating that shit. Seriously. Stop eating out. Stop eating processed foods. Try to eat things as close to the whole food as possible. Now, we'll get into the diet of whole foods and talk about that, in the next podcast. But really, the big thing to avoid is processed foods. So this is why I hate vegan stuff. Like, this is why I hate a lot of health foods. Anything that's on the interior of the store, I hate it. Exterior store foods that require power to keep them cold or warm. Preferably cold or frozen. Like, you want fresh whole foods and make your own food from it. Like, you can go buy pre-made burger patties that are cooked, of course. You can go buy pre-made steak that is cooked and chicken and all this stuff from Sam's Club and have it all prepped for you. Or you could just put in 1 day a week's worth of work and make all the food for yourself, make it healthy, know what's in it, and have the pride that you did something good for you. And I think that is so lost on people, is that the benefit in doing it for yourself is not just that you know what's in it and that you know that it's healthy because you made it, but there is a certain amount of pride in making that meal for yourself, of knowing that you were capable of providing a good, healthy meal for yourself. And then when you start to see the results, it's like, I'm doing this. This is me. I'm not dependent on this company to make my food for me, because we're already so dependent on so many other people for everything. Like, the fact that I can put this podcast out there to you guys, there's so many levels of dependency for this message to get to you that YouTube and this microphone company and the cell phone company, all these things, like, you guys aren't just standing in front of me. So I am dependent on a lot of things. And I'm not saying you can't have dependencies. What I'm saying is that if your success is predicated on another person, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. And look, if you want to get real into the weeds, then you'd be like, well, then you need to grow your own food and you need to do it all from scratch. I mean, yeah, that'd be cool, but that isn't the world we live in. But you can take a certain level of responsibility and action for yourself and quit fucking blaming them for everything. Meanwhile, you're making the choices within their choice. So, like, you can choose to play the game or not. And choosing not to play the game means it's a lot less fun. Like, it's a lot less eating out. It's a lot less going to parties and drinking alcohol and doing things and going to events where there's food and or going and not participating in that part of it is tough, because when you're trying to lose lots of weight, you gotta be tough on yourself, because the not being tough on yourself is what got you here in the first place. You got to toughen up on yourself, and it's okay. It's okay to be a little firm on yourself. We're not talking about flogging or, self-immolation. We're just talking about telling yourself no. So, another thing that I want to be specific on is stick to foods. Look, these are the 3 key points. Stick to foods with simple and whole ingredients. Shop for food on the outside of the store. It's typically going to be fresh or frozen, which means it's fairly fresh. It's not cooked. It's not processed as much. I'm not saying that all frozen foods are not processed as much. There's a lot of horrible frozen foods. But buy fresh meat if you can. If it looks good, freeze it yourself, break it into baggies, portion it. Buy fresh fruits and vegetables if you can. If not, buy what you have to frozen. But stick to that as much as you can. And lastly, I would say avoid things that have lots of added sugar. Added sugar is terrible. Essentially, all they're doing is adding calories. That's all they're doing is adding calories, adding things that are just they're. I'm not saying sugar is leading to the diabetes crisis, but the amount of sugars that we have added into our foods that we're eating for no reason other than our body likes sugar and people know that. So if they can hide some sugar in there, it's gonna create a response. Look at the sugars, and if it says 20 grams of sugar and added sugar is 15, that means it's a lot of fake sugar. I'm not talking about an apple. There's no added sugar in an apple. But if you buy an apple and it says added sugar on it, you should go, what the hell am I looking at here? I've never seen that. But in all reality, that's where it's going to get to, is like fruit and vegetables are going to start being manipulated to be more healthy for us. With GMO stuff, they're already kind of doing that. All right, more specifically, if you're allergic to something, maybe you are. Maybe you just have an inflammatory issue. The thing is, there's a lot of our foods that are so poor in quality and so heavily processed that it's hard for me to even say if you are allergic to something or you're inflamed by something. Could be both. What I would say is, if you have a lot of reactions to the food that you're currently eating, start with an elimination diet. Go to something very basic. Get some organic, whole brown rice. Get some organic chicken breast and just eat that for like 3 or 4 days. You may not be happy, but ask yourself how you feel. And if you feel pretty good, slowly start adding in things. There is a way of eating, and I am blanking on it right now. But it FODMAP. So when you're adding those foods back in, this is a FODMAP thing. So when you're adding those foods back in, you then add them back in a certain order that allows you to kind of determine, am I having a reaction or not? So if that is something that happens to you, if you're eating foods that you gain 2 or 3 pounds of water weight from, like, stop eating those things. That's not good. Also, I should not even have to say this, but maybe something will happen here after this election. Like, my boy RFK, that's who I was gonna be putting my vote in for, but unfortunately he dropped out of the race, so I'm kind of in a pickle here of feeling like I have to endorse someone that I'm not super pumped on in order to get somebody that I am super pumped on into the office that I want them in, which would be that health department, hopefully. But he talks about what we're doing to our kids and like what we're putting in our kids' foods. But it's not just our kids' foods, it's our adult foods as well. Like, they're getting it as kids and they're getting it as adults, but there's all these chemicals and microplastics and carcinogens, specifically like food dyes and things that are banned in a bunch of other countries, but they put them here in our food. There are chemicals that we use for sweetening that have been linked with cancer. I think it was a blue one. Not all sweeteners are equal, if you catch what I mean. There are a bunch of them. Splenda, raw seem to be pretty good, but there are some out there that seem to have some pretty bad side effects in large doses. But that's the other thing, is that a lot of these sweeteners in a small dose, they're fine, but if you're drinking like 12 Diet Cokes a day, it's probably not good. In the studies that they did where they were able to like make mice basically become like mutants and weird, just create very poor health conditions for mice, they were giving them like 100 diet sodas worth of this fake sugar stuff. So it wasn't a real test. The other thing that I would say with nutrition is to avoid combos like high fat and high carb, and to avoid a high fat, high carb diet, which is really American. That is the American diet. High carb, high protein, low fat seems to be pretty good for a lot of people. A lot of diets are based on that way of eating. And I would say that low carb, high fat, high protein seems to be working for a lot of people. But whenever you start combining that high fat with that high carb, you're doing bad things to your body. You're creating insulin spikes. You're creating cholesterol spikes. You're screwing with your fight or flight system, your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, of just like feeding them something that is killing it, but also activating like a rest and relaxation response while also putting your body into like this fight panic mode because of the food's inflammatory response. So just avoid a lot of processed foods and avoid eating like quesadillas. They're delicious, but that shouldn't be the main thing that you eat. Cheese pizza. Think about things like that, and that's those high carb, high fat things. Cheese does have protein in it, but really I think that where we're talking is people adding oils and butters and cheeses to like everything that they eat. Let's start, I guess. Let me go into a little bit on the TDEE and a few other things, and then we'll call it a day here, and then we'll hop into the diet one at some point. I might literally just stop this and keep recording, and then if you see another podcast in a week wearing the same thing, it's just a continuation. So remember, total daily energy expenditure is total daily energy expenditure, TDEE. So we start by calculating the BMR. BMR calculators are pretty easy to come across. Now look, I'm going to go through and kind of read this formula, and I'm just going to, maybe I won't read it. It's super long. Essentially, coming up with a TDEE, I've created a worksheet for it. I will try to make sure that these formulas of some sort are in the show notes so that you can see them. But there's a different formula for men and women, which is why I don't necessarily want to read through them, because it's like 88.362 plus parentheses 13.397 times weight in kilograms, close parentheses, plus. So like, yeah. Essentially, there are formulas for this, and you plug in certain numbers to certain places, and it spits you back things like, what is your weight in kilograms, what is your height in centimeters, and what is your age in years, and you put those numbers in, and this gives you a rough estimate of essentially where you are. You then can take that number, that BMR number, so that's how you calculate your BMR. And to calculate your TDEE, they essentially just tell you to multiply it by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 to come up with a rough average of calories burned in a day. This is why I tell people to just stick to the BMR, or maybe just add 100, 200 calories to it and then see how you feel. is because whenever we're using a multiplier is completely subjective. And I think a lot of people don't understand what these multipliers are, like how it works. So let's say so here's an example. A male, 265 pounds, 77.5 inches, and 32 years old. So this was me 2 years ago. 265, 6'4.5", 32 years old. So the formula, 86.362 times 13.397 times, now my weight in kilograms, 120.2, plus adding up my height in centimeters times 4.799, and then minus my age times 5.677. And that came out with a rough basal metabolic rate of 2,457 calories. So let's just call it 2,450. Then if I wanted to know, on top of my BMR, if I were to add in that extra 5-10% for my TEF and maybe very no exercise, so I'm not getting that 5% of exercise calories, 5 to 10%. I'm just getting my TEF and my NEAT, but I'm not active. I might only multiply that by 1.1, which gives me a total of 2,700-ish calories. So then maybe I do exercise a little bit. I am a little bit more active. Maybe I then want to multiply it by 1.25, and that gives me 3,071. But let's say at the time I was working out every single day for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. I was training clients, and then all throughout the day I was staying active. I was very highly active. Was I a 1.35? Was I burning 3,300 calories a day? Well, in fact, I was burning close to like 4,200 calories a day. So you can see how there's a limit to what is actually there and what it can provide you based on what the TDEE strictly lays out. But it gives you a starting point. It gives you some ideas. And an example for women, the numbers are just different. So a woman weighing 200 pounds or 94 kilograms and being a height of 5'4", her numbers would be, rather than multiplying it plus this number or that number, there's different numbers for the men and women that go in there. And that's how they come up with the calculations. So a couple things that aren't really accounted for, I feel like, in our culture is the constant crash dieters. They've really kind of screwed themselves over, constantly trying to manipulate their body, because let's say you're a girl and you're obese and you work a desk job and you never exercise because you don't like to sweat, or you don't like to be dirty, or you just don't know how, or you keep your nails done all the time, or blah, 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 blah. You think you're a princess, but you're not. And you just treat yourself like shit, and then you complain that you feel like shit. Well, you have done a lot of damage to your body. So in order to start reversing that damage, you got to do a little bit of work. Like, boy or girl, you got to do a little bit of work. You got to get going. You got to get moving. And I think a lot of people are refusing to put in the work on the exercise side of things, and they'll just sit at their desk and eat 1,100, 1,200 calories a day and be like, I don't lose weight. Really, they're probably eating like 1,500, 1,600 calories. They're not being active. They're not counting their beverages that have sugar in them because they don't think about that. So like, there's more that goes into that than what meets the eye. And I would say that for most people, that's the way that it is it's not just this, well, this is what I'm doing. Most people are lying because they're embarrassed, and I get it. Like, no one wants to shamefully admit that they would drive home and stop by fast food and eat it all, or stop by the gas station and get slices of pizza and donuts and things like that. Like, no one wants to admit that they're making those mistakes, even when they're working with someone like me as a coach. It sucks. It sucks being honest with yourself. But like, that's where this all starts. So you got to start with something, and being honest with yourself and understanding that what you're doing that got you here is not going to get you out of here. Like, you're crazy if you think that somehow you're magically going to have this weight loss thing cracked without dieting and exercising. And I don't mean dieting like picking a diet, but I mean changing the way you eat. Hormone issues are probably another thing that people don't look into when it comes to their nutrition, of their hormone levels being fucked up from just poor nutrition and poor behaviors with their life, their entire life, as well as genetic factors. I have met so many people that have hormone issues as I've gotten older, and I don't think that was the case 50 years ago, even 30 years ago. For people in their 30s to commonly have hormone issues, the amount of men that I know that have low testosterone in the hundreds and 200s, and women that have, high testosterone or low testosterone, or their progesterone or estrogen levels are off, or they thyroids being jacked up from kids and being given all these drugs throughout their pregnancies to help, or whatever it is. It's like that type of stuff is killing people. And I don't mean literally killing people. I just mean like it's killing their progress. And maybe it is literally killing people. I don't know. I don't have enough data to say that's true. The other thing is being obese for such a long time, and I think I talked about this a little bit, but being in this fight or flight state is just doing irreparable damage to your body. Like me being fat for so long is the reason why my back is so effed up. And I think that it's hard for people to believe that. They don't want to believe that somebody could have 2 discs completely degenerated in their back and early onset arthritis and vertebrae and essentially no blood flow to portions of their spine, all because being 400 plus pounds for a huge chunk of time, smoking, doing all those things that were so unhealthy at the same time, just wreaked havoc on my body. And by the time that I actually gave a damn and started doing something about it, it's too late. Damage was done. A minor thing became a major thing. And then compounded with that, there was some information that came out about melatonin just being horrible for people. And I read the information about the melatonin, the studies, and what was out there, just to kind of see what are these doctors saying. And then I looked at my life, and it's like, I started taking melatonin then, and that's when my health started getting worse. I started getting weaker and blah, blah, blah. Like, I had to go on TRT because my testosterone levels were like under 200. And I am not on testosterone anymore. I also don't take melatonin anymore. And now my testosterone levels sit between 400 and 500, which isn't super great, but it's still a lot better than it was, considering that if I start taking melatonin, my testosterone level literally drops in half or even more. So there's significant data linking melatonin with hormone issues. This isn't a new thing. It's just something that a lot of people don't pay attention to because they dose it at a dose that they say is not harmful, but it is very harmful. Melatonin is a hormone. So when you're taking a melatonin pill, you're taking a hormone pill. Thyroid gland stuff, I see more of this in women than men for some reason, but I actually do know a couple of men with thyroid issues. And one of the people that I know got his thyroid issue figured out, and now he's built like a brick shit house. He was real wiry and scrawny and struggling to keep his weight on, no matter what he ate and how hard he worked, but he he got it figured out, and the dude looks good. He thought he had hormone issues like testosterone, but just the thyroid. We already talked about environmental issues, and environment is not just like where you live, but how you live. So what's available to you, needing to drive 30 plus minutes to a grocery store or a gym, not having things available to you. All of those different things play a huge role essentially in your nutrition. So next podcast, what I want to get into a little bit is talking about specific diets, Mediterranean, paleo, Whole30, kind of talk about those together because they're all pretty similar. They all try to preach the same gospel. But I do want to talk about, diets in general, like if people want to know more about specific diets. But the reason why I want to talk about these three is that these three diets are all marketed as kind of different things, and they're all the same. They're all the same for the most part. They all encourage you to eat whole foods and stuff, but I want to get into that a little bit more specifically so people understand the marketing that they are being sold on when it comes to these diets and buying those foods at the stores that are related to their diet. So that's all for today. That's all, folks.
Teach old Jesus how to drink that wine.